Hey, welcome guys and gals. One more time, this is Small Towns Unscripted, and I want to introduce everybody. I think we know each other, but this is Tara Chelan. Tara owns the store here in Manson, and she's one of the sponsors of this show. So come down and see Tara here right behind the coffee cabin in the entrance of Wapita Point. My name's Russ McClellan. I own Frontline Real Estate, and I'm one of the sponsors of this show as well. This is Nicole Turner. She's from East Wenatchee. And Desiree Sackett-Phelps.
Sackett-Phelps probably is
the order
appropriate.
Yes. And thank you guys for coming. Andy, Precht, Cash, Precht, Kevin, Precht. I really appreciate you guys coming. This whole podcast, I don't know if you got a chance to watch any of our episodes so far, but it's been really an honor for us to speak with everybody so far in the community. And basically, it's the idea is to get to know each other a little better, even though we might know of each other. Small towns are pretty funny like that, where I think even more than a bigger city, you actually know of a lot of people in a lot of industries because you run into each other in various places, whether it's church or a pub or the grocery store or
sports or
in
school
your business
or whatever,
at school.
Yeah.
Where in a larger city, maybe you don't. Maybe you're anonymous to everyone, even though there's more people. So you end up kind of, I think all of us kind of have memories of people either from an industry or a segment in time. And depending on what segment in time, maybe that's good, maybe that's not so good. Yeah. Especially if we grew up here and been in business here forever. So anyway, thanks for coming. And what we try to do is just have an authentic conversation about this town, about your life in this town, about your family, about what you do and how you feel about everything. So wherever this conversation goes, it goes. There's not really, hence the unscripted part, right?
Yeah, sure.
So why don't we start, Kevin, we'll start with you. Maybe you could just introduce everyone and go from there.
Yeah. My name's Kevin. This is my son, Cash, and my dad, Andy. And we have had the funeral home here for many years. Dad and Mom came to town. He can tell you more about that in the 60s. And I was born and raised here and had lots of fun experiences growing up in Chelan. It's a much different town now than we all know what it used to be back then.
For sure.
But there's pros and cons to all that, and we understand that. But it's fun to reflect back on what it used to be and walk downtown and know everybody. And it was even to the point we lived up on Mountain View Drive in Chelan, and I used to be able to ride my motorbike down to middle school. So it was right down the hill through an orchard. Yeah. I guess some of the kids at middle school heard about it, told the principal, things like that, and I think Dad got a call, and the Chelan police maybe was asking some questions, but it was through an orchard, so it was on private property, so it was no problem. But stuff like that, I don't know if that happens so much in today's world, but it's
maybe in Manson it still does.
Probably so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had Marion Peebles on, so we were reflecting on some of those kind of conversations he got. Those calls people would get before the kids got there, that parents knew what they did before the kids got done doing it.
And going to elementary school across from the funeral home in Chelan, every day I'd get out of school and walk over and see my dad at the funeral home. So I was always with Dad growing up. My mom worked up at Regency Manor in a hospital, so she was busy a lot. So I was with my dad. And that meant a lot to me over the years, and kind of grew up right alongside him.
Okay, now I have a question because I'm a victim of nepotism myself. And when I was growing up, I did not want to do what my parents did.
Yeah. I had that same experience for a period of time.
Okay, because I was like, I am not doing this. I'm going way over here.
Not doing the home show.
Not doing it.
I
I'm
will
going to
say
go
that's
way
a
over
healthy
here.
growth prospect.
And
to
then,
go through that.
here,
Yes.
So did you...
growing up through, probably starting about 13 or 14, I being around my dad, I'd wash the funeral coach, mow the lawn there at Precht Rose Chapel, and I got more involved just side by side with my dad, and thought, oh, this is probably what I'll be doing, as an adult. And then went over to the University of Washington, went to college in my early 20s, and worked at a big funeral home in Seattle. to get more experience. And it was during that time I was like, I don't know for sure that this is for me. I need to really think about that. And I actually looked at some, construction management things and whatnot.
That's a good job over there.
Yeah, and it was a good experience. It exposed me to a lot of things. But at the end of the day, I realized that this was for me, and especially being part of the community, but serving the community and knowing that things were changing, and my approach to this job, fulfilling this role in the community was, out of necessity going to be a little bit different than how it had been in the past, and so. I think it's part of a healthy growing process and kind of coming.
I like that. I like
coming
how
to
you
terms
framed
with
that.
those things
That's
yourself.
really good framework
Yeah, good.
for that. And so my other question for you is wow, I feel like it takes a unique person to do what you do. It's not only like more than I could even stomach, but you're hitting people when they hurt the most. I mean, you grew up with this, so you've seen it, and yet you still want to do it. That is,
I'd imagine it's a double-edged sword, where it's probably you're very honored to be there. You're very honored to be able to help people at a time of grief.
Yeah.
And I know you've helped me and both my mom and dad, and and what I loved about what you guys do is you and everybody that works with you are empathetic to a point where it's so sincere that the sincerity that you offer in your business, I think, comes through, and that in itself is a helpful part of the healing process from the beginning.
But
So
how do you do it?
I want to
That's
thank you for for that.
nice.
We're honored to serve the community. We understand it's a difficult time for people. It's a time that most people have never faced before. That's one of the biggest things. Is a lot of what we do is just the education about how this process goes when people lose a loved one. Like I said, most people haven't dealt with the loss of a loved one before. So much of it is just education, talking about, what would your, maybe your mom or your dad, what would they have wanted? What do you want in remembering them and paying tribute to them? And there's a lot of different takes on that. That's part of what's kind of evolved over the years. There's not so much of the traditional funeral any longer, but there's a lot of celebrations of life and memorial services. We understand that, and so we've adapted our offerings to meet those needs and hopefully do it in a compassionate and caring way. And also, a local way too. A lot of these people that we serve are friends and neighbors and lifelong friends, and even our generation, some of us are now losing our parents, and so serving our friends as they're going through that process, it's a great honor, and we try to do it with great care and professionalism.
I guess my question though is, you talk to police officers or people who deal with big things, and it affects them. How does this affect you? How do you go home at night? I mean, it's a lot. This is a lot. What you do.
There can be a lot of trauma, and especially in the case of like a young person, when a young person passes away. And we've had a lot of tragic situations over the last 10 years with there's been suicides, there's been overdose deaths, just a lot of difficult situations, and those are very taxing and difficult to handle on the other side as the professional. But with that, we're aware that we're there as the professional. We're there to help people through this process, and so it's our role to kind of help be a guide, kind of maintain a presence and kind of a steady influence to get people through that. So,
all right, Cash, I saw you yawning, buddy. I better get to you next. Wake you up. How old are you, Cash?
I'm 9.
9 years old. You go ahead.
I just want to say my dad works very hard for what he does.
Yes, he does.
I appreciate that you can see that at 9 years old. Not every young man can see that. Maybe they think he's just gone or he's just this, but you really believe it.
I'm going to bring my son over. Can you train him to say that?
Cash, what would you say to all the other 9-year-olds that are listening? You seem like a leader. And you go to Riverside Academy, right? How do you like your school?
I like it.
Is that Wenatchee?
Yeah.
Wenatchee.
Yeah. What's your favorite subject in school?
Maybe math.
Okay. Do you like to play sports or do music or anything like that?
I I don't really like music, but I like basketball.
Nice.
There we go.
Right.
I can tell by the shoes, buddy. You got
Yeah,
some good
March
ones
Madness
on.
is coming up.
You know, this girl right here got a full ride scholarship to play basketball at a college.
Yeah.
You know that?
Did.
And she went to Manson School, so
Yeah.
there you go.
Hey, you played basketball, didn't you?
Played through my junior year.
Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, we had, you know, some fantastic athletes at Chelan during that time. I just didn't have the coordination looking back on it. I kind of outgrew my coordination. I was one of those people, you know.
It happens.
So
That
it didn't
growth
quite
spurt.
go as well as I would have liked, but it was a great experience. And, you know, sports, we all know, it teaches you so much. And whether you win or lose, whether you're great or not that great,
Yeah.
there's a ton to be gleaned from it. So,
Yeah, that's the nice thing about private schools or smaller schools, where you get to participate like we all did, and
Oh, yeah.
almost everything. If you don't play a lot, you get to participate all the way through, and
For
Yeah.
sure.
get all those lessons like you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, we'll come back to you, Cash. Okay, I want to talk to your grandpa a little
Yeah, let's go back in time.
bit. Hi, Andy.
Good to be here.
I appreciate you, and love to hear some of these stories from a little bit further back than the business. I'd love to hear about you and your wife. I'd love to hear about where you went to school, where you grew up, what it was like.
Well, I came out of Omak, and we were raised up there, and then we went over to the University of Washington, and actually all of my siblings have gone there also.
How many siblings do you have?
Well, I have two stepbrothers and a sister
Okay.
who is not living now. So we all were over there.
All four of you, huh? That's
Yes.
great.
I love being the minority. It's great to find other dog
so
fans.
there's some Huskies in this room. That's good.
We won't hold it against you. Keep going.
So anyway, during that time, my wife actually is from Southern Illinois, but she went to nurses training in St. Louis,
Interesting.
and after graduating from there, she had an acquaintance in Seattle, so she decided to get on the train and come westward. And she did so, and actually my brother and I both had the same acquaintance with the lady that she knew from back in Illinois, and so that's where Patty and I crossed paths.
About what year was that?
Well, that was we were married in '65. I graduated in '64. I went to Los Angeles or Pasadena, and I went to mortuary school there for a year. And then she and I were married. I moved back, and we were in Wapato for about just short of a year.
Wow.
And then we moved, I got a job over at Kirkland and Bellevue with Green Funeral Home there. And so we moved over there, and Patty continued to work at Overlake Hospital.
Okay.
And a short time later, we had the opportunity to purchase the business here in Chelan from Edna Smith. Pern had died earlier on, and she was there running it with help from a couple of people from Wenatchee. So in September of '67, Patty and I moved to Chelan, and if you look at the house next door to the funeral home, that's where we ended up, and that house went on the tax rolls in 1908.
Oh, wow.
And it already had a minor fire in it that consumed about half of it inside. And so that part was repaired, but the rest of the house needed a lot of work. So that's how our life in Chelan began,
Oh, right there on Main Street.
right
huh?
there on Main Street.
Did you
And,
guys, had you wanted to get back over here on this side?
Well, we did, but you know, it looked at what the opportunities were.
Yeah.
And that one just happened to present itself in a timely fashion.
Serendipity.
So it was all right for us to come back over.
What was it like in that era with Vietnam kind of in full swing in the mid-'60s to late '60s? How do you remember the town or the feeling of the town and the death associated with war? And how did that affect you at all, or if any?
Well, first of all, I want to go back to what you addressed a little bit earlier with Kevin. One of the things that helps us is when we have the experience ourselves that other families are burdened with now. And that is a great assistance. I lost my birth mother when I was 9 years old to breast cancer.
Wow.
And so my father remarried, and fortunately, I've had a family down in the east of Moses Lake who are wheat farmers, and I was able to spend many of my summers down there employed on the farm. So I had a variety of experiences, but at the end of the trail there, I always wanted to come back to the funeral industry, even though my education was in business at the University of Washington. But that's why once I graduated there, I chose to go to Los Angeles to do my 12 months of more choice school there, living in Pasadena because it was some friends that I knew of there and whatnot, so it worked out.
So to some degree, it was almost, would you say in reflection, it was almost a calling since you were 9 years old, that grief kind of led you to help other people, or how would you?
Well, I'd like to say that, but in
That's
truth,
a good story, but
I think in truth, it took time for me to be able to think that whole thing through. My experience on the farm was something that I would never trade. And I went there for better than 10 years every summer, and a lot of times even in the spring breaks I would be down there working out in the fields and whatnot. So I had a variety of experiences, but at the end of the day I was okay with more choice school and coming back. And the opportunity to come to Chelan had not opened up yet at that time. So it just occurred after Patty and I got married, and we spent almost a year at Wapato, south of Yakima.
that had to be interesting.
That was interesting. And Patty worked at Yakima Valley Memorial Hospital, drove up there.
Oh boy.
And you were working in the funeral service then?
We lived in the funeral home at Wapato.
Okay.
Oh boy. Okay.
And that building is still standing. It's been remodeled and enlarged, but we actually were in an apartment at the backside of the funeral home right next to the garage. And it was a kind of a humble beginning, but it was okay.
Yeah, we all were there once, right?
That's right, and we survived just fine.
Yeah, it's good for us all.
You had a short commute, so that was good.
That is.
Kidding.
So do you have the funeral homes in Chelan and Wenatchee?
Wenatchee, yeah.
Is it the same name, or is
No, Precht Rose Chapel in Chelan, Jones & Jones Betts in Wenatchee.
Okay. And are there other cities too that you service now?
There are others too, yeah. So it's a family business that has expanded over the years. We have Brewster, Ephrata, Moses Lake, and others. So yeah.
Nice.
Wow.
That's an interesting. I thought you did. So, would you find it's pretty consistent, generally speaking, the model, the business itself, of the grieving process, or are communities by and large different, or people?
I think there's definitely differences between the communities. I mean, as an example, over in Ephrata, we serve a wide variety of people, but there's a contingent of Ukrainian families that are
I knew that.
in Ephrata.
I didn't know that.
And there's also a contingent in East Wenatchee as well. So there's some of those kind of little things that enter in that make
And
it
they have their own
way.
way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're very adept at serving different types of cultures. We serve a lot of Spanish families, and many of them still send their loved ones back to Mexico.
Oh, that's
So
gotta be
there's
a
a fair
process.
amount that's involved working with the Mexican consulate to achieve that for them, and then transporting the remains down to Mexico, where they're received, and then usually by foot, sometimes taken out to like a family cemetery in rural Mexico.
Whoa.
So there's a lot of paperwork that's involved, and that's another aspect of what we do. So
That sounds a little political there. You got to get involved with some government agencies and
it's just working through their hoops and
I'll
checking
bet.
their boxes, but that's a process for sure. So yeah.
I'm curious, Andy. Can we go back to your high school and growing up in Omak? What was it like? What was it like growing up in Omak as a child?
Well, I have to say, because I didn't have experience in growing up in other communities, that it would be pretty normal. We were always workers, and we had a basketball hoop on the garage in the back, and we would play basketball out there, and we could play till 10 o'clock, but then we had to shut the lights off.
Nice.
The neighbors were tolerant, but at 10 o'clock, and the police would drive through the alley. But it was always a terrific thing, because there was never an issue of where we were. We were right there, and the police always knew that. And the only trouble that they ever had was if the people that were joining us would park in the alley. And they said, if we had a fire, the fire truck would have to come down through. So they said, well, I have to ask you to move across the alley over into Henry's parking lot over there.
And you couldn't shoot a 3-pointer if the car was in the way.
And so that's how it kind of all began. But, for me personally, my experiences were not just there. And I could not say enough about my experiences of working on the farm
Yeah, that sounds like a
and
memory.
having that experience.
It seems like your childhood memory is that farm versus.
Was it the family environment there that was different from home that made you?
Well,
or was it? The,
it was, but then again, my birth mother, her sister was and her husband had the owners of the farm.
I see.
And it's become quite a large operation now. They're operating close to 20,000 acres.
Well, now why didn't you want to become a farmer? You loved it. You're
Well,
passionate about
I
it.
did, but they had children,
Oh,
and I enjoyed working there and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I chose to come back here after Patty and I got married,
Yeah.
and I worked in the funeral home there at Wapato.
Yeah.
And so we put in our time working as an employee,
yeah.
and it served us well.
Yeah, were you encouraging of Kevin to get a position at a larger firm? Was that in one of the game plans, or was that just an idea you had on your own while you're? And what did you go to school to be originally? Like, what was your study?
Well, I went to the UW Business School.
Business.
Which is what Dad did too, and
Yeah.
actually Grandpa Precht as well. So
Ooh, I
wow.
love this.
family tradition.
UW legacies. I love it. Cash, no
our
pressure.
Our other two don't seem to be that interested in the UW, so maybe it'll be Cash. We'll see. But anyways, so yeah, no, but I was always given the option, and it was always like, hey, if this is something you feel called to do, come back to the family business, that's great. If not, that's fine too. So it's whatever.
Now,
pressure.
I
That's
mean,
cool.
Yeah.
I don't want to. It seems like your sisters weren't really interested in this, and to me that doesn't seem surprising. I don't want to sound sexist, but it just seems like not a lot of women are in this industry.
Actually,
from what I
on the
have
contrary,
observed.
now I think
Educate me.
70% of graduates from mortuary college in today's world are women.
Oh,
So this is
really?
rapidly becoming a women-dominated profession, which is great.
that is
Women do
cool.
wonderfully at this at it.
that
and
is
so it's good.
cool. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time at funeral homes, but it's always been men.
We wouldn't
That's
hold
been
that
my
against you.
experience.
Yeah.
I would like to add, though, that 2 of our daughters have PhDs in pharmacy.
Oh.
Yeah, I knew they were
They
smarty
chose
pants.
a different direction.
I knew
Yeah.
they were both smarty pants for sure.
Just fine.
Dad's got some good stories though about the Chelan ambulance in the early days of that.
Yeah, I'd like to hear how that
It's
all
a
came
whole
together.
different world back then.
Whoa, yeah.
Well, and even how it's then adapted to what it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we arrived here in September of '67 in the house next door, which went on the tax rolls in 1908. And there was a lot of challenges.
Here, you want me to put it on silent for you?
Yeah.
That's right. We have people come in, buy clothes while we're doing this.
Oh
and
yeah, we
phone
get it all.
rings.
We get it all.
It's
That's
all
what-
good.
That's the small town part of
Hit
it.
silent. Where is it?
Upper
Go ahead,
right.
Dan.
On the side, upper left there, right there.
Right there. So in 1967, you're back in Chelan.
We came to Chelan,
Yeah.
and actually Vernon Kirby had a funeral home which was right across the alley from Sand and Surf, and which was fine. It was not a problem.
Now,
for
Sand and
us.
Surf, let's put this in perspective. Is
That
that
was
where
the
Sabato.
Savato building now?
No, I think it's where the Exxon or Shell is.
the Shell
76.
station.
76.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yes.
That was Sand and Surf restaurant.
Right.
Oh man, I got the wrong
Anyway, we started in there, and it was pretty humble beginnings, but that's all right. We were acquainted with work, and but Edna Smith had tried to run an ambulance, but it really was not very well done.
So-
And that's not a disrespect to her. It's just part of the times.
So there was, go ahead, Des.
In 1967, we didn't have an ambulance in the valley. Is that what I'm
Hardly.
hearing you say?
Yeah, hardly.
Interesting.
But
Hardly.
what I
You
did,
kind of did.
Kind of, sort of. Wow. Okay.
John had a car. He was at the bar.
Yeah,
Right.
Somebody had
Along
a
those lines, yeah.
Called John.
Okay.
what I did is I had found a contact down in Portland with a gentleman that dealt in ambulances and funeral coaches and whatnot, and I had contact with him, and he had about a 3 or 4 year old Cadillac ambulance down there that had been used,
This is fantastic.
and so I arranged with him to purchase that, and he brought it up to Chelan. So that's what I started with, actually.
So this
It
was
was-
all ambulance calls, ambulatory calls, not just someone passing away.
No,
Just
well,
anything.
Working
We
with the
did both.
hospital and the
but
doctors.
we didn't use that for death calls. It was just for ambulance
Okay.
calls.
Okay.
Dedicated ambulance.
Yes. And it was a humble beginning, but it was a beginning, and we were able to go forward from there.
Wait, so people called you, or how do they get you?
Well,
Yeah.
they called us, or they would call the police, or the hospital, or the doctors. It didn't matter.
Okay, all right.
You know, and that's when there was an operator on the line,
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
Wow.
which was kind of an interesting thing also.
Party line, switchboards.
yeah.
Well,
okay.
and you didn't need to have, like, this is the time before you had to have, like, special permits and licensing and.
Well, we're going to get there.
Okay, all right.
Of course.
Good question.
So
Back in the day.
what happened then is it went along, and to my knowledge, there was not ambulance service out here, but the blessing in the whole thing was that as things progressed, and Greta Griffiths was a great help
Amazing
along the
person.
way. And the wheels started turning, and we had to have an EMT class, emergency medical technician class, which was held at the Chelan Hospital. And Dr. Charles James
I remember James.
was the overseer of that. And fortunately, out here, the Manson Fire Department got on board with that also. And when it developed further on and continued developing, the nice part about it was that this whole area was served by Lake Chelan Hospital District for a taxing area.
Oh.
So when it came time to buy newer equipment, there was matching equipment, and the Manson Fire Department was critical in serving this part of the area as well as, and they had all these members of the fire department to look upon. In Chelan, we had to get volunteers because we were able to connect with the fire department.
Right.
And
Yeah, that's what I'm
actually,
wondering. Like, did you drive it? Like, who drove it when they called?
You did.
Yeah.
Nice.
we had different ones though as we developed
Sure.
later on. But actually it started in Chelan where Cashmere Valley Bank is today. That was an old abandoned gas station, and the hospital purchased it because it was empty. And so it had 2 bays, and we were able to park the vehicles in there. We got heat and lights in there and whatnot.
Nice.
And that's how it started.
That's great.
From then on, and we got the EMT class completed and got some volunteers. And one of those was Bob Gervais, who was over at the clinic. He managed the clinic, and several other locals
Yeah.
that helped along get that thing going. And so it was kind of a progression, if you will.
So before that, it was just loosely. Was it like was there an employment, ambulatory care? It was just kind of loose.
It was, if they needed somebody transported to the hospital, they would, a lot of times the telephone operator would call us. They would call in, that's the way it was handled back then. And they would call call the police. And Marion Peebles was well acquainted with that.
Yeah.
I think it was kind of common, though, in smaller communities. That's how it was done. And then sometime in the 70s, whether the state came in or the feds, but they kind of moved it more towards closer to what it is today.
911
Yeah, it was
and-
kind of a bigger
Streamlining everything.
and
But
standardized
see,
like the
Isn't
ambulances.
this the cool part of the small town?
Yeah. It's
That people
great.
just step up, fill a hole, get it done,
Yes.
work together,
Yeah.
figure it out.
And the two
Figure it out.
communities
Thank
working
you.
together too, Chelan
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Manson.
so
and-
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So really, when you look at it, it was quite well done, considering where it started
Yeah.
and how it was able to develop.
Well, your
Love it.
background in business and your work ethic, and your ties to family.
Work ethic. Thank you.
Well, and desire to help. I mean,
Yeah.
these are
Yeah.
this. I don't see someone doing what you do without having a desire to help.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean,
Greta was instrumental though, because she was retired, and actually she had been trained as a nurse, and she provided some free help up at the hospital and whatnot. But she was perfect in our situation there to get volunteers, and she had a lot of contacts, and she was very critical. And sadly enough, as we sit here today, almost all of those people are gone.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Andy, we started this, I don't know how, we've done 10 or 11 or 12 of these. And it often comes to me while I'm talking to people and other people are mentioned,
Yeah.
that it's too bad we didn't do this before. Or it's too bad there wasn't some kind of record of these
Yes.
kind of conversations
Yeah.
for their families, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Because it's historical in nature. And
Yeah.
that's kind of where we like to go with this, although it doesn't have to. There has been some amazing humans that have blessed this valley that we no longer have the chance to talk to, but through people like yourself.
Yeah, we talk. We drop names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We drop names.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really
And
great.
everybody has the stories of the people that they were mentored them.
Yeah.
Whether it's Carol Lewis or Earl Stanford or Otto Ross or all the, we've had some amazing guests on already. And like yourself, these historical stories are often mistranslated, I think. And it's good to hear directly from a source.
Okay,
Well,
so go
what's
ahead.
good about it is if we deal with the facts instead of some opinions,
The telegraph game.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're right. That is very true, and that actually is a good segue, because I wonder, in your line of work, if you've ever felt misjudged, or
Or judged.
thought
Well-
of differently.
Well, I think it's easy for somebody to misjudge us if they don't have any understanding previous to coming to having to deal with what we're trained to deal with. And for me, I lost my birth mother at age 9. My sister died at age 39 from breast cancer.
Oh,
So, I had some experience
of your own.
personally
Yeah.
of loss. And that helps you understand when you're trying to assist other
Oh my
people.
gosh, absolutely. When you
Yeah.
say it wholeheartedly.
Yeah, my dad
I
lost
mean,
his dad right when I think his dad was 36 here when he was 8 in 1941. And then his mom, my grandmother, Daisy Grimes, outlived 3 husbands.
Yeah.
And I used to say, man, you're kind of hard on men. She's like, they just couldn't keep up with me. She lived to be 101, as you might
but
know.
I mean,
so.
I would say that's true of a lot of things
Yes.
in life, where unless you've walked the walk,
Yeah.
What would you think is the biggest misconception that, and I bet it's confusing too, because people when they're struck with grief unexpectedly, especially,
Yeah.
I would imagine that at that level of stress, they're not always thinking logically. A lot of
Or-
emotion.
I would say maybe you're not your best self.
Yeah, sometimes. And maybe they are the best. I mean, maybe it's a little bit of everything, but I would imagine, what are some of the pressure points or misconceptions that people may have that you work through in a career?
I'll let
I
Kevin
think
respond.
they're maybe not understanding what's involved in the process, like I said earlier. And again, most people haven't dealt with death before, so that's. But there's the physical aspect of handling what happens with the remains. So we're obviously involved in that. But then there's also the legal aspect of the death certificate, the various authorizations. There's even part of this where it's a lot of people are pre-planning these things, which is a huge change in our offering. Is the pre-planning. People want to get this done as part of an estate planning process to get their wishes down on paper,
Which is huge. It's
yeah,
a
it
huge
really is.
deal.
It's been a tremendous positive.
Yeah.
I was going to say, is that helpful to you?
Very helpful, and it's helpful mainly to the
the
families,
families.
just in terms of the peace of mind that
So
it
much money.
offers. Knowing this is exactly what maybe mom or dad wanted. Here's everything that's signed. In some cases, they take care of funding it, so that burden is off the family. But there's many positive aspects to that. So talking about some of the evolution over the years and some of the changes, that's definitely one of them. But again, very positive.
And are you
So-
doing that when you say pre-planning, are you giving people the opportunity to pay over time
Yes.
while they're alive?
Right. Yeah. That's
Oh, they
correct.
can do it directly with you.
Yes, yeah, we have a person, that's what he does. His name is Brian Ross. He's excellent, but he's dedicated to working with people ahead of passing
That's great.
and getting it planned for.
I did not know
and,
this.
Yeah, and so it's a huge thing. It's positive in every respect. So,
Yeah, the money aspect, I would imagine, especially in challenging times financially over the years, when someone is hit with a death and then hit with, this isn't free. I mean,
No.
Yeah.
you guys are do an amazing amount of work for the money that you do charge, but because it's tremendously valuable. But it's not a nonprofit either, and it's not something you could do if you didn't charge people. So that probably becomes a challenge at times, and I'm sure you guys have been generous in a lot of different ways over the years with
That's
a lot of
part
different
of being
families.
part of the community, and there's
Yeah.
all different needs in the community, and we're very sensitive to that, and it's definitely been the case.
And
over
I
the
know
years,
about that, some of these, and I want to thank you on behalf of all those people that didn't get to say it. 'Cause
Yeah.
Yes.
like often when you're going through that stuff, it's hard to focus on being
Yeah.
grateful to outside
Yeah.
sources because you're right in the middle of the heat of stress and,
Yeah.
and grief. But
Yeah.
it was, I know my grandma's had that, and when my dad was dealing with that, it helped him. It
Yeah.
helped him.
Yeah, that
understand.
pre-planning is really such a powerful thing, and it's really become so prevalent too. And you have a lot of, people that are working like doing their estate plans and things like that, and that's being asked. Do you have your funeral arrangements
Right.
in place? And so,
Okay, I have a weird question. So, there's like the things that are most common that we know about, right? You get buried in the ground, you're in a vault, or you're cremated. These are very typical. But are there any like outside of the box ideas? Because I met a guy once who was trying to start a business where you like became a tree.
yeah,
I know. I
there
don't know
is
how that
that.
works either.
There is that.
Like
yeah.
you get like in the ground in this pod, and then the tree grows where you are. I'm
Gotcha.
just saying, is there
Yeah.
anything you've experienced that's like,
That's
There
it.
are newer forms of disposition that have kind of come on the scene.
that's the word,
Disposition.
disposition.
Yes, there's the one that you're talking about. There's also a process called aquamation.
Whoa.
Yeah, but and so those are just kind of on, I would say, the fringes. And
Yeah.
they haven't really taken hold. I would say a lot of it just has to do with the complexity that's involved in those processes.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
also the economics of it don't seem to really line up thus far.
Right.
with
Like it might
what-
sound like
what-
a fun idea, but how does it actually happen?
That's it. But we have some people that come to us with that, and if that's what they want, we can help.
Like the jewelry and the
accommodate that.
ashes
Yeah,
and
sure. Yeah,
different
Do
things
all
like
those
that
things.
for
A lot
family
of
members.
one of the nicest things I think about the evolution of what's happened is just the personalization that's gone into memorial services, and we've
Yeah.
all probably seen that. but it's become much more of a personalized thing to the individual who passed
What's
away.
trending?
Trending?
Yeah, like what's the most popular disposition?
We probably do more cremation than anything else. Yeah. So that's a very
was curious
popular
about
and
that.
become very, very much embraced. We own and operate our own crematory facility in Wenatchee. It's the only one in the area.
And you'll help. I mean, you'll help handle veteran services if they're veterans. You'll help. I know with my dad, you're very open to whatever ideas someone has. We had the celebration at the graveside, and we brought a saddle out and set up a whole like cowboy like venue for him.
Part of our role is actually just helping families think through that process,
yeah.
and what meant something to your loved one that we can bring into this and make it special. The other thing we do is prepare video tributes. We have a specialized platform that we use for that are very personalized and nice video tributes that are the right length, not too long, to show at a service and things like that.
That's
so
great.
Yeah, well, it's great. Let's, if you don't mind, let me transition. I saw something on this paper that I thought was interesting, and I kind of remember playing basketball with you, Andy. I think because you played too, and we all used to play in the mornings
down at the gym
Yeah.
in the mornings.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I remember, and every once in a while, you guys come to Manson too. I think there was open gym in Manson once in a while, but maybe not. You just
I was never able to get that far away from home.
But I remember you played. I played in the mornings with you guys.
We played down at the high school gym in Chelan for probably close to 20 years.
Yeah.
A lot of mainstays down there too, like the Ingstroms and Bob Watson used to come down a lot.
Yes.
Scott and Tom Young, they used to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, had a lot of fun.
A lot of basketball.
I was his age during that time, and I'd be sitting on the side, and when we're done, we'd go to Safeway and get a coffee or something like that.
Yeah.
What year did you graduate high school?
1997.
97. So I was 10 years before you. 87. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I remember you were good too.
Dad had a good team up at Omak. They did very well.
Yeah.
So,
His high school team.
Yeah. You had that baby hook, I think, or something, if I remember right. Yeah.
Well, just to add a note of factual note here, up at Omak, Dale Easley played at Okanagan, and if you remember the name, Dale actually played at the University of Washington and was very successful. And I have continued periodically having a friendship with him. And he graduated from UW as an electrical engineer, and I believe he was employed with Puget Power. But he's been a wonderful friend, and I took care of both of his parents. They lived in Chelan,
Nice.
of all things.
And that's
And,
so nice.
So I always have enjoyed my friendships along the way, and that Dale was one of them. And I believe he's still alive, but I'm not sure.
Better do another check-in.
I have no way of knowing that at this point. But
Yeah.
So can we talk about your wife a little bit and the Regency Manor days and her
well,
work?
Patty worked at Regency for some time, and then she was over at the hospital. And unfortunately, Patty suffered an affliction with Guillain-Barré, and I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's a debilitating illness that affects joints and muscles. And she experienced that in 2012, and she was still an active RN there at the hospital, but that ended that. And she was on a ventilator for 10 weeks. And had to take her over to Kindred Hospital in Seattle, just down from Virginia Mason. And it was questionable if she was going to survive, but she couldn't breathe. And that's why she was on the breathing machine. And it took 10 weeks for her nervous system to recover from that and to start breathing on her own again.
Wow, scary time.
So Patty has experienced at least 35% permanent disability, and at times it's probably been up to 40%. And I've been her caregiver since 2012.
Oh, look at you.
Wow.
Good for you.
13 years.
That's
You're not a
Regency sat up on the hill, and so I can remember Mom going up there. She would work 7 to 11 or 7 to 3.
7 to 3.
Yeah, and so she'd be up early. We'd be going to school, but on the snow mornings, Mom usually drove the station wagon and trying to get up that hill to work back in those days, before the days of the de-icer and
or
all that.
plowing hardly even.
Yeah.
Right.
That was a different time
Yeah.
for that whole thing too.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah.
She make sure she took her boots with her, I bet. Huh?
Yeah, a lot of times they
Walk
wouldn't make
the
it up the
finish
hill,
then.
all the nurses, and they had to hike up the rest of the hill. So.
Yeah. Wow.
So, Kevin, who were some of the guys you grew up with in school?
Well,
Or gals?
Yeah, 97, John Jay.
John Jay,
John
we
Jay,
were
Frank
talking
Nino,
about.
wonderful guy.
That's how I know Kevin.
Yep, yeah. In fact, John Jay and I took a trip way back with our dads, way back when we were probably 6 or 7 years old, to Indianapolis for a tractor pull. But, and we toured the casket company on that trip. John Jay keeps talking about that. It was
John J. Wood.
Yeah.
John J. Wood.
That's a write-off.
Good trip.
Yep,
yeah.
There you go.
exactly.
Brooke Nickel, Jeff Carlson,
yeah.
E.J. Ferguson.
Those are some very good basketball
Yeah, those
players.
were some good ball players.
Mindy Pirro, Kelly Colmeyer. I just saw Kelly down at Mission
yeah.
Ridge the other day. So
Nice.
yeah, we had a good group.
did.
We had transition back then, so I started as a class of '96, but then was kind of, instead of being held back, they had transition between kindergarten and first grade.
Okay.
Mrs. Ingstrom taught that.
Oh, great.
Anyways, so I ended up as class of '97. So
Oh.
anyway, yeah, it was
Not a
good.
bad move for you.
But you mentioned Carol Ools. Carol is a great person. I love Carol, and she gave me my first job at the Calico Cow.
Oh,
Oh,
And-
boy.
I
talked
worked
about
there
it.
too. I think
Did
that
you?
might
Okay.
be where we
Yeah.
first connected. You were
So-
probably my busser.
Probably so. Yeah. It was, but it was such a great learning experience out there, and I just learned so much from that. It was so valuable looking back on
You
it.
learned to work really hard for Carol.
Breaking down boxes and weighing out the barbecue beef and
You
all
don't-
the stuff
yep.
that went along with that.
You're never not moving,
Yeah.
and you're never not working.
Didn't your mom work there too for a while?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a fun job and fun, a lot of
Yeah.
tourists that came through there, and it was a good
Yeah.
menu. And
That was
it
where Chelan Resort Suites is
yeah,
now,
yeah,
in Lakeside.
the Calico Cow.
Yeah, for people that don't know what the Calico Cow is, it's a drive-in. Carol had actually talked about how the Lakeview Drive-In and the Mack family and that drive-in would share resources as as friendly competitors
Yeah.
when necessary, and at a time when that's what people did.
Yeah.
And maybe they still do. It's
I
not.
think they still do.
Yeah.
Let's,
Yeah.
let's
Maybe
believe
they
that.
do.
I think they still do.
All right,
Yeah.
well, good.
I do too.
I think they still do.
How would you say? Let's transition to that. How would you say it's changed in Chelan since you were growing up here?
To me, Chelan back then is a little bit closer to like what Brewster is now.
Yeah.
I mean, not in every way, but in some respects, just in terms of, Brewster, everybody still knows everybody
Right.
and things like that. Chelan, not nearly as much as it used to be.
A lot more new faces.
Yeah, and that's okay, and property values have gone up, and it's good for the real estate business and things like that. So it's got a lot of positive. That
It is when you can find somebody who can afford it.
brought with it. Yeah, that's
You
a
need
factor.
both buyers and sellers.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
No, it's a challenge. We're actually working on that, Kevin. As a real estate development company, we have a very strong passion as a team, a pretty good sized team now, to help solve the essential worker or attainable housing, not the subsidized housing, but that missing middle, the nurses, teachers, cops, hospitality. That's something that Frontline's involved in with some investors and
Yeah.
some land holdings, and we're really focused hard on trying to solve that problem
Yeah.
because it's a big problem.
It's very common now. You have to move 10, 15, 20 minutes out of town just so you can afford a place to live.
Yeah, and Chelan, it's not just Chelan. I mean, Wenatchee has a very similar problem. Bend, Oregon has the same
Cashmere.
problem. Yeah, Cashmere.
Yeah, it's nationwide.
Well,
really.
what did we learn at the Seattle Home Show? ADUs are very popular for that reason, and Wenatchee's going to be, I think, turning to that pretty
Yeah.
quickly as a good option for
Yeah,
helping out fill that gap.
yeah.
Something,
Relax some of
something
the
has to
zoning
give.
standards.
Yep.
It's just something has to give, supply and demand, right? Like something has to give.
Well,
Or
yeah, even people that we employ. I mean, these are people along those lines of teachers and firefighters.
Yeah. Comparable salaries.
And it's a very specialized professions. So to get a licensed, experienced funeral director here in the Valley is very, very difficult to get them to move here.
Yeah.
And then that's before the cost of living.
Right.
So it impacts everything, including us.
Now, we've talked to people that the doctors, surgeons, teachers. I mean, many professions have that same challenge where it's just, I'd love to move there, but I can't afford it, period. And that's the gentrification concept, right? Or there's a lot of people moving from a place that's more money.
Yeah.
And now we have Starlink, which allows people to do a little more work from home, a little faster internet. And all these things are evolutionary in nature. So with that extra demand, we have to figure out how to handle the expenses and supply.
Yeah.
And if we figure it out, it's going to take a community. What ends up sometimes happening, and I think it's okay to talk about it on these kind of podcasts because it's important for the whole community.
Yeah.
And that is, if you never want to see another house built, the homes that are here are going to be very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it is embracing change and embracing some development that's smart, that's has a conscience, that really does think things through, rather than just being anti-development. Yeah. Because if you're anti-development, then only those with the money will be able to afford it.
Yeah.
So that's just basic business, UW, supply, Econ 101.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway, so that's kind of I think we're on the right track, and we have some really exciting plans for our future that we've been working on for years, 3 or 4 years now, but we're getting to the point where we're getting closer. It's that overnight success, took 25 years.
Yeah, there you go. It's a work in process.
Yeah, anyway, it's always curious, what is, let me ask you all, what does this town mean to you?
I think for me, growing up here, it really is part of my identity. Even though I would say bounce between Wenatchee and Chelan, and have a footprint down there too, but this is lifelong, born and raised home. Yeah. You guys understand that. And so, and nothing will ever change that, it's just, and just despite all the changes that have occurred, it's still Chelan. And we have our, I'm in the business, so it's something I think about. But we have our burial plots up at Fraternal Cemetery in Chelan, and that's where we'll be, along with my parents and grandparents and things like that.
So what are the names of the different places? The Fraternal
I didn't
is
know
by
that
the,
was I didn't know what it was called.
Yeah.
Fraternal is the one that's up on the hill
By the rodeo?
By the rodeo grounds.
Okay.
And
Riverview.
then there's Riverview Cemetery out overlooking the gorge.
Was that still active?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, they're part of the Chelan County. There's a special taxing district for those. So they're very well-run cemeteries, very well-maintained. Big asset to the community to have.
Yeah,
those.
and the people that work there, are all great.
Yeah.
My neighbor works there.
And Jamie's been also instrumental in just talking about cemetery plots and the what do you call the headstones?
Headstones,
and,
yeah.
and the various kinds, and then all on your Mr. Boyd,
Yeah.
all of them. That the process is, to your point earlier, it's multidimensional.
Yeah.
And it goes on for a while. It's not just you show up one day. There's a lot of conversations and a lot of counseling and a lot of decisions that you help people make, and it's cool. I mean, it's it doesn't get easier sometimes, but it gets smoother.
Yeah.
When you have somebody help you with other ideas, like you said, and so often we don't think about that until it happens, and then you're like, what now?
Well, and it seems like you have to make a lot of decisions within the first week or so after somebody you love passes away.
Yeah.
And that's when you don't want to make decisions because you're like, what? My world just changed.
Yeah.
Speaking about growing up here, though, back then, like you guys, I remember just taking my bike and just riding around town, starting younger than Cash. I used to sell ice cream to the tourists, a little bike trailer, and they would gladly pay $5 for a Dub bar that I bought at Safeway or something like that. But I don't know if it's so much that way anymore.
You're talking about your motorcycle to school.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Keith when we were in high school. He graduated, 84? He used to take his loader tractor to the high school from his house with a shotgun in the loader, put it up so he could go bird hunting after school.
There you go.
So that's probably not happening anymore.
I don't know.
Probably get
I
thrown in jail
Brody
for that now.
That he might be the first kid in a while to ride a horse to school.
Yeah.
But if he can do it I'm a single mom.
Yeah.
If he can get on that horse and ride to school, he's doing it.
One
for
less
sure.
trip you got to make.
One less trip down the mountain I got to do.
There you go.
That's great.
That's awesome.
We'll see.
You know, you might experience this, Andy. Earl Stanford told us something about growing up here that was unique. You know, back when the communication wasn't as easy, you talk about a party line and the telegraph. My dad talked about a phone where his phone number was too long and short.
Yeah.
You know, so you go back in time, right? Well, Earl said, like, if you kids were out playing, you know, first of all, you're either working or you were playing, but you were never in the house while it was daylight. That was something wrong with you if you came home before dark. And then sometimes he said they'd just be out playing and be in the winter, and they may not just make it home, so they'd stop at somebody else's house, stay the night, they'd give them dinner. Did you remember those kind of things growing up?
No, actually, I don't.
No, it wasn't
Maybe
like
that was a
for
Manson
Andy.
thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't
His
that
parents were like,
Omak.
They
whatever,
didn't do
kid.
that in Omak.
And they were like, we didn't worry about them.
We still have one of those old, speaking of the phones, one of the old phones down at the funeral home. It's in this like kind of cupboard, and you can open the door. My handwriting from when I was Cash's age is still on there, but it's the old phone to call the operator, the Chelan operator, and have them do whatever they do.
That's great. That's great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cash, what do you think about all this?
I think it's pretty interesting.
Good.
I think you might have a ringer here,
Yeah,
Kev.
there you go. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I have to say that I think you have helped both my family and my husband's family multiple times. And sorry, this is touching me. So, but I want to say the peace of mind. I know there's, like you said, there's a lot to do right after you lose someone. But to be able to look at family members and say, no, they have it, that's huge from my perspective. Gosh.
I know.
Thanks, Des.
But
I didn't think that we'd all make it through this
I didn't-
without
well,
tears. Yeah.
But I have a kind of a funny story. And I'm gonna like change my face here so that it is funny. We lost my grandma, and she was cremated, and you guys helped us through that. And she passed a long time before my grandfather passed. And the whole time after we lost my grandma, my grandfather lived with my mom and dad. And they lived in Manson, and then they lived down on the river, and then they lived in Oregon, and then they moved to Colfax, and then they moved back to Manson.
Jeez.
And this whole time, my mom thought that my grandma's ashes were traveling with my grandfather. And you were keeping them safe for us that whole time. And I just chuckle because, I mean, that's small town right there where you knew eventually Marge would come back in and say, hey, my mom's ashes here somewhere. And of course, Andy had them there for her when they returned back. But that was probably 18 years you guys kept those safe for her, knowing they would come back.
Jeez.
So anyway,
That was
just
a long time.
it was a long time, and it meant a lot. It meant a lot to my mom and her siblings, but also just having been through some of those things myself. Just the peace of mind you provide has been, and I was telling my kids before I came down here to do the podcast that we were speaking to you, and that's never crossed their mind, like having to deal with the death. And I said, yeah, you need to think about it, because they're the people in this valley that for generations have helped all of us through it. And if they weren't here, where would we have gotten that help and support from? So it got my 20-somethings all thinking about, gosh, it's a service that we don't always think about till we need.
Yeah,
So
it's a little bit countercultural. Our culture, we don't. It's not a fun topic to deal with. We understand
Right.
that. We're sensitive to that. And so, but
Well,
it's a
the
reality.
earlier you start, I would imagine that like the payment arrangements could be pretty small depending on how many years you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have a lot of flexibility in that.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
If somebody comes at her kid's age in their 20s and says, hey, I just want to put a few bucks away every month, that's perfectly doable.
Sure is. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure it's in a trust account of some kind.
It's in by the way the RCWs are set up, we don't receive payment for goods or services before they're provided, so it goes to a third party. So it actually goes into a modified form of life insurance that's there, but it's just for the use of the final expenses with the funeral.
Makes sense.
So that's how it's set up. But it's
Highly regulated.
very highly regulated.
I'm
Yeah,
sure.
by, rightfully so.
It could
But,
probably that to me would seem like a great gift for someone, although unusual. It would be
yeah.
a considerate gift if you start thinking about how inflation is inflation, right? Everything costs money and everything gets more and more expensive. So a gift of that to someone, has that happened before?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, more and more are seeing it as just part of the estate planning or end of life planning process. And, if somebody's planning to go into a long-term care facility someday, they're also maybe planning for this part of things too. So it's much more hand in hand than it ever has been with that whole, part of the planning process. So, yeah.
What are some of the toughest times in business, Andy or Kevin? What have been some of the tougher things you've had to go through?
Well, one of the things that I think periodically, and there's no way to escape it, when a family comes to you and has needs, but they don't have the financial wherewithal to cover that.
Yeah.
And we've never turned a family away,
That's amazing.
ever.
That's amazing.
It is amazing, but it's a fact of life. If you work in this industry very long, you come to understand that can happen.
Let's think about that statement for a minute. We've
Pardon?
never turned away a family.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
It says a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is something that, nobody wants to happen. Nobody, wishes to be at the funeral home making arrangements for somebody that they love. So we appreciate that. I mean, we understand that and are sensitive to that and respectful. And
I would imagine, just from the outside looking in, that siblings arguing would be an issue about what's the right thing to do when there's no will, when there's no direction.
that very much can be, and that's another reason why the pre-planning has become so important, really, and effective, is that, when maybe a first spouse passes away, things are relatively calm. And a lot of times they're very calm after the second spouse passes away too. But then again, there's all different family dynamics out there, all different types of situations. And it can easily come out, when maybe a second parent dies. Now, there's all kinds of childhood feelings that creep into the equation and things like that. And so we become, adept at dealing with those situations and helping those families kind of work through this process and get through that to get them kind of where they need to be.
Mediator.
Yeah, counselor.
Yeah, counselor, mediator, lots of hats.
Yeah, I mean, we all understand family dynamics, and they can become poignant when a death occurs.
You're good at all these nice words.
You had how many years of practice?
Yeah.
Since you were probably like 5?
Yes, wow. Because
So-
I know some family dynamics that are,
Different word than poignant.
pretty hot.
Do you ever just say, there's a
Pretty
parking lot, go duke it out,
Yeah.
go come
Work that
back,
out.
Let me know.
Yeah.
strongest one wins.
Yep.
And I would imagine in, is it I wouldn't say it's recession proof, but it's, nothing is recession proof. Let's say 2008, 9, the financial crisis. And do you see some of that affecting your business, or taxation rules and regs?
Well, not so much that. People, when faced with unexpected, expense, yes, it becomes more difficult if maybe the economy is not doing so good. So there's that part of it. I think a bigger part is just the fluctuations, and the people passing away. Like COVID, we had a lot of deaths that were kind of brought forward because of, secondary causes, not necessarily COVID, but secondary contributing causes and things like that. So
Interesting,
it was a busier time, and really nationwide it was busier, even for the hospitals, but also things that come after the hospital.
Is there a difference from your end when there's foul play involved?
That isn't involved with us. That's the coroner's responsibility. So if there are, unexpected circumstances surrounding a death, the coroner gets involved. We work hand in hand with the coroner's office. We have an amazing coroner in Chelan County and his support staff. Very professional, very thorough. So we're
So you don't
blessed
have to deal with
that.
the kind of the messy.
Not so much. Now we will respond to a scene, when called upon by the coroner. If it's a traffic fatality or something like that, then yes, we do.
Okay.
We are part of that. But
Not
again,
as the ambulance anymore, but
No, not as the ambulance. No. But again,
Andy's not
it's-
rolling up in the old caddy.
Yeah.
probably missed that at times. Though he probably had the license to speed.
Yeah, I think Dad probably made several fast trips to Wenatchee in those years.
Got that figured out. Well, I want to talk about that crazy story of the bull that ran through the cemetery at the time.
That's Dad's story.
Tell me about that. How'd that work out?
That was most interesting. I'm trying to think of the time of year. It wasn't in the heat of summer, but it was probably early summer. There's a remote cemetery up west of Brewster, and we were going to have a graveside service up there. And so the family that runs cattle up in that area actually went in. The cemetery was fenced. So they took a backhoe in and opened the grave and got it ready. And so the people, including myself, were gathered around outside the fence. Well, during that time, a bull decided to enter into the cemetery, and he got over and he was snooping around where they'd opened the grave. And pretty soon he was pawing his around, and would look in the grave, but he was just generally just taking his time. So the people that opened the grave and had the cattle, they said, do not go in there when that bull is in there. And they said, he'll come out.
Yeah.
Well, we waited for, 30 or 40 minutes. He didn't decide to come out. So they actually had to take the backhoe in there and run him out of there
He just wanted to pay his respects. What are you talking about?
before we could have the graveside service.
That's a
And they
first.
got him out, and successfully.
Yeah.
Did he
and
sit
he
there on
didn't
the
try
edge
to-
looking in still? I want back in. They can jump those
He
fences,
decided
you
to
know.
go somewhere else after
Yeah.
that.
There's a lot of times in life where I'm glad there were not cameras on phones.
Yeah.
But that would have
That
been
would
an
have been
exception.
perfect.
That would have been great, right? To have that on film, moments like that.
For sure.
The owners of the bull were the ones that opened the grave up there anyway.
Yeah.
They kind of knew the bull a little
Take the
bit.
front end loader of the
Oh my
tractor.
God, chasing the.
Just heard him out.
You have to have
I see it.
one of those on standby every funeral after that.
Yeah.
Every great side service.
So funny.
Cash, what do you want to do when you grow up? Solid.
Maybe
Go
take over my dad's business.
Already? Really? Wow. Do you have brothers and sisters or no?
Yeah, he has an older sister, Brielle. She's 17, and younger brother, Connor. Brielle, she's thinking maybe a nurse, and Connor, he's thinking maybe an electrician. So he'd like to own his own electrician business.
We need those.
I think at 9 years old, I was thinking about going swimming.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm gonna say wow.
Or riding. I was in a rodeo probably. Thanks to my dad and your dad.
Yeah.
Dad started at 4. I think I started at 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at 9, you seem like you got an idea of what you're thinking. You already like math. You ever heard of the Washington State Cougars?
Nope.
Plug your ears.
Let's
Dad.
talk
Plug
after
your ears.
this.
Come on.
Nope. This is the earmuff moment. Earmuffs. Earmuffs.
That's great.
I pulled up and saw Tara's Husky plates. So I go, I think I know whose car that is.
Yeah, you're in the right spot.
Yep.
We were we were Central Wildcats, but my daughter was
We
a
were Central.
Washington State girl.
Well, you're outnumbered today.
Yeah, we're outnumbered.
That's
And you were an Eastman Wildcat, so that counts.
There we go.
Bunch
Yeah.
of Wildcats.
Oh, brother.
for sure.
Well, anything we haven't covered, guys? It's been real fun talking to you about
Very
your
interesting.
past experiences.
We appreciate it. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do this. I think it's neat. I enjoy watching your podcast myself. and
Good.
It's been really fun to see lots of friends come in here and recount some old times. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good for our community.
Well, and as Dad said, you've been such an inspiration to so many families in so many different ways and such a blessing to them that, again, I'm sure in those times, not everybody, including me, probably says thank you enough. So
Yes.
on behalf of all those that we know
Yes.
are grateful, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Well deserved.
And good luck, Cash, whatever you want to do.
Dream big.
All right.
See see you
Thank
back here in like, I don't know, 15 years.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe
Have
Brody.
you on the, yeah.
There you go. No bulls. That's a good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
guys.
you all. Yeah.
It's great to be with you.